Hello and welcome to The Bond, the Christian podcast for attachment and needs-based parenting. We want to understand children's hearts, reach parents' hearts, and see God with new eyes. My name is Johanna and I come from Germany, and I am a mom of 3 kids. One is almost 4, one is almost 2, and the other one is still growing in my belly. Now that we have heard quite a bit about the topic of bonding, we will talk about another topic that we are extremely passionate about, namely the process of maturation. For the next episodes, discipline, obedience, and character will also play a big role. We will be looking at how our children become mature people. In today's episode, we want to explain to you why it is so important for children to be confronted with boundaries and how they learn to accept them from within and adapt to the things they cannot change. The adaptation process, or in other words, adjustment, is one of the 3 processes that help a person to become a mature person, and that's why it's incredibly important. Monica takes her 4-year-old son for a walk in the city. She has promised him that he could ride on one of the electric children's cars where you throw in a coin. And soon they find a little taxi car with which he is allowed to ride. About 10 minutes later, they see an even cooler car on their way, which Monica's son is totally thrilled about. He immediately gets into it and calls out to her with beaming eyes, "I want to ride that one too, Mom." Monica feels a little hot at the thought of having to disappoint him, but she knows that she doesn't want to spend money on one of these cars again. When she tells him, "You're welcome to sit in it, but I won't throw any more money in, once is enough," you can probably imagine the reaction. Monica's son has such a violent emotional outburst that he screams in anger and despair. How would you react? Let's stop here. I'll tell you later how Monica reacts. What has happened here? Monica's son has come to a point where he is confronted with a no. He can't go any further. He's not getting what he wants or what he firmly believes he can still somehow get. He has touched a limit. There's an incredible number of these impasses. Gordon Neufeld, a developmental psychologist, calls them the futilities of life in a children's life. They can't reach the light switch. They can't return the new sibling. They can't always have mom all to themselves. They lose in a game. A toy is broken. Screen time is limited. The day ends. They cannot fly like a bird does, and on and on and on. A child's life is full of futilities and frustrating experiences, and some might seem like total banalities to us, but to the child, it's their world. Children are living in the here and now. They cannot yet see things from other perspectives. They are self-centered and follow their impulses. A mature adult is able to deal calmly with many of the situations just mentioned. He has foresight. He can postpone his own wishes. He shows consideration for others and so on. All this still has to develop in a child. And before we go any further, I have to make a point here. Wishes are not the same as needs. Let's say Monica's son is sitting at a dinner table. He is totally frustrated and wants a sandwich first, but then starts crying that he'd rather have cereal. Monica sees that he is actually just tired or frustrated by many other things that have piled up during the day, and now is not the time to teach him discipline, but to satisfy his need for rest or help. Then she could, for example, take him on her lap and walk him through dinner, with a lot of empathy and not take his frustration personally. And that does not mean that she will give him everything he asks for. When we talk about limits in today's topic, it doesn't mean not to satisfy children's needs for closeness, love, self-determination, and so on, in order to teach them that you can't have everything in life. That's where we need to be able to make a very delicate distinction. We need to fulfill our children's needs and help them to accept the fact that not all of their wishes can be fulfilled. These so-called futilities don't stop in adulthood. We can certainly relate to that when we lose our job, the car breaks down, our cell phone is stolen, loved ones move away, break up with us or die, our teenage child is behaving in problematic ways and doesn't want to know about us, or Corona comes along and our lives change. It doesn't feel quite so trivial anymore, does it? These are our futilities. From the first day of our life to the last, there are things that frustrate us, but we can't do anything about them. A child's immature nervous system is totally overwhelmed by even small things. When a child shows strong emotions, it has a meaning. The reaction to frustration in babies is actually always crying, and that is usually still acceptable and arouses our empathy. But the older a child gets, the more uncomfortable adults feel at the expression of his or her frustration. And here the question arises: what do I see in a crying child? I think the majority of us immediately see, when they see an angry child, a rebellious, evil, manipulating child. I once heard a statement: "An evil spirit has entered my child and must be cast out." This image of the child has been imprinted on us for decades because of the lack of knowledge about what really goes on in child's brains during an emotional outburst. The usual theories of the past assume that a child rebels against us or develops malice in the tantrum. But what actually happens, and especially what a child needs at the moment, was completely unknown, and the information is only spreading slowly even today. Our concern today is to let you look at such an unpleasant situation with your child from a different perspective. Attachment parenting is not anti-authoritarian parenting. You don't give up yourself and your parental authority, and it's not about walking around all day with a sweet voice and letting your child's every whim wash over you. We want to show you today that you can be consistent, strong, and at the same time protective and loving with your child, and that even in these situations the power of attachment is again the key to the child learning to accept boundaries from within. There are so many things in our lives that we simply can't change or prevent, and that frustrate us. Both children and adults need the ability to accept these futilities and failures and find a way to deal with them. Gordon Neufeld, in his research and from the findings of other researchers, has observed a specific process that needs to happen in the brain in order to do this, and he calls this the adaptation process. Every person is born with the ability to adapt to the circumstances of life that they cannot change. A loving upbringing must not take away the child's chances to learn to adapt. If we parent with a definition of love that saves our children from all their ends of life, fulfill all their wishes, do not show them our own limits and let them do anything they want, then we have a wrong definition of love. This is self-sacrifice on the part of the parent. In a loving relationship, everyone is allowed to show their boundaries and they should be respected. A loving upbringing must not take away the child's chances to learn to adapt. If we parent with a definition of love that saves our children from all their ends of life, fulfill all their wishes, do not show them our own limits, and let them do everything they want, then we have a wrong definition of love. This is self-sacrifice on the part of the parent. In a loving relationship, everyone is allowed to show their boundaries and they should be respected. So those who, out of fear of their child's angry reaction or because of distorted definition of love, guard the child from all the futilities of life will deprive the child of one of life's most important processes. Let's take a closer look at the adaptation process, and for that let's take the example of Monica's son. He's not allowed to ride on the second toy car. This leads to enormous frustration. This is the first thing we all feel when we don't like something or something doesn't work out. Adults are usually better at hiding their frustration or dealing with it, so we think the child is the problem and shouldn't be frustrated, but everyone experiences frustration on a daily basis. Now picture this feeling of frustration as it is driving into a roundabout. The first exit to let the frustration out is the exit of change. The child tries to change something about the situation with all the energy he or she can muster. And this is a very important human impulse. To put it in simple terms, the part of the nervous system in the brain that is responsible for activity is activated and produces energy. It helps us humans to achieve change in others, in circumstances, or even in ourselves. Imagine if we just accepted everything that doesn't work without opposition. If we let all decisions and circumstances just wash over us. That would be a disaster. There would be no inventions, no changes, no evaluation of any kind. Sure, frustration is a really negative emotion, but it has extreme power and can do a lot of good if you can deal with it maturely. At this exit, change, a child is trying to fulfill their need for self-efficiency. They want to accomplish something, and if we want our child to develop self-confidence, we will fulfill this need as often as we can. So we will at times also give in or find a compromise, because if the nervous system of the brain, which is responsible for change, can never achieve anything, negative beliefs can unconsciously become anchored in the child's brain. Beliefs such as, "There's no point in fighting for something, I'm not going to make it anyway, I won't succeed in life." Or on the contrary, "I must fight all the harder to show everyone. I must never let myself be controlled again. I basically do the opposite of what others want me to do." Both types of personalities point to an unmet need for self-efficiency in childhood. Neither has a healthy sense of self, but that's just a side note. Let's come back to our situation. The child is trying to change the situation, but he doesn't yet know how to effect change in the right way because of his immaturity. So he rages, screams, tries to pursue his mother, and begs. In this situation, it is extremely important to understand that the child is fighting for himself, not against the mother. He is not trying to figure out how to dominate or manipulate his mother. Because of the maturity level of his brain, he is not even capable of that yet. Very often, however, they cross the boundaries of us or other people in the process of trying to achieve change, which may include hitting, throwing things, biting, insulting, etc. When boundaries are crossed, it is clear to each of us that we protect ourselves or others. We say, for example, "Stop. We do not hit each other. I don't want to be hit." If the child still keeps hitting, you can move a few steps away, but stay inside. Maybe you will have to hold the child's fist for a short while. Protecting yourself doesn't mean ignoring your child or deliberately separating him from you until he calms down. It's about protecting your own boundaries, but still staying close at all times. When the child insults you, you shouldn't tell him, "You're a naughty child, how dare you treat me like that, shame on you, I don't want to see you anymore." But instead, "I don't want to be insulted, that hurts me, but I understand that you're really angry." This way you show your child your boundaries and stick to your decision. And this is where the adaptation process starts. If frustration cannot bring about change, There is a second exit of frustration, but one into which a child cannot yet drive on his own, but needs the help of the caregiver, namely the exit of the feeling of futility. In order to be able to adapt, a child needs to feel the boundary emotionally. Just as frustration is a feeling that we feel in our whole body, and there's a lot happening in us when we pay attention to it, futility must also be felt. Here, a change happens in the nervous system when the brain registers that there is a boundary that cannot be overthrown. The amygdala, which is a part of the emotional brain, switches from the nervous system that is responsible for change and action to the resting state. This is one of the big and important points that we really need to understand. It is a specific emotion that we need to guide our child into, the sadness and the disappointment. This is the second exit of frustration, crying over the things that cannot be changed. The adaptation process is not a process that takes place in the cognitive realm. It has nothing at all to do with the mind and reason, but takes place exclusively in the emotional brain. Let me try to explain why. When a child is put in a stressful situation and a no or other futility always puts a child in stress, the immature nervous system is totally overwhelmed by it. The emotional brain is on alert and takes over, so to speak. The cognitive brain, which is responsible for rational decision-making and logic, is completely blocked. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for self-control, has not been integrated yet. A child under 7 thus can't think normally in an emotional outburst. They can't even hear you properly. So when your child shows strong emotions and excitement, you can't reach the child at all with logical explaining, with reasoning, and generally with lots of words. There's no point in Monica explaining her no to her son or at great length now. To be able to accept a futility, you don't have to fully understand the reason for it. Adaptation takes place through emotions. This is very important. Transformation of frustration is necessary because it gives you the power to transform something you cannot change into the feeling of disappointment. All the build-up energy in the brain must be let out, and this happens through tears. Neufeld uses the term from mad to sad. This is absolutely essential because it has been found out that only through the feeling of sadness in the brain real adaptation takes place. So it is tears of futility that allow children and also us adults to grow from such situations. Tears are quite common in children, and sometimes they are really exhausting and not welcome in society. Being strong nowadays means not crying, always being happy and not letting show your pain. And that's a big problem because tears are a gift from God to adapt to the futilities of life. They are normal and part of our life. It has been discovered that these tears of futility have a different chemical composition than tears of joy, tears of anger, or the tears of chopping an onion. According to one study, tears of disappointment are full of toxins. The body cleanses itself by crying. Tears accompany us in reconciling with a boundary and letting out frustration. So crying is a cleansing process and also a healing process. As long as we can't or won't grieve for something, we will run headways into the same wall over and over again with our frustration and continue to pile up frustration and the feeling of anger inside of us. But if we give space to the very vulnerable feeling of disappointment and hurt, we allow the process of healing to take place. We first have to go through this process of crying and grieving about a futility in order for something new to begin. Then the toxic frustration is let out and the brain has energy for something new. Children who cry a lot are not spoiled, weak, or even bad children. From our adult point of view, we think there aren't that many reasons for our children to cry, but there are never more reasons to cry than in childhood. The more children are given permission to channel their frustration through tears, the more balanced and stronger they become as adults. A person who has been allowed to adapt to negative circumstances in a healthy way will be resilient, learn from mistakes, heal more easily from trauma and loss, has the ability to deal with stress, the ability to give in sometimes, will be able to deal well with criticism, and much, much more. We always think that a strong person is one who fights persistently for their goals, but a truly strong character is one who can accept defeat and failure and is able to bounce back stronger. What a wonderful ability we humans have. God has given us a tool for the most difficult moments of life, which He does not send us, but which happen to us because of the sin in the world. With this tool, the adaptation process, we will come out stronger than we were before. What a strength to not break or harden our hearts when faced with the suffering in this world. We don't always have to cry literally. This is especially hard for men. What we need is an inner willingness to allow vulnerable feelings of grief and disappointment to be felt. This has nothing to do with the falling into depression or feeling sorry for yourself, but with not suppressing or deflecting the pain inside of you. You should come out of this kind of grief cleansed, healed, and strengthened. Now, you might ask yourself the following questions. Isn't it more sensible to nip frustration in the bud so that a child stops being rebellious? Or how do you get a child who is raging with frustration and maybe even tries to hit you? How do you get them to find their tears? We will dig into that in our next episode, part 2, and we will also tell you how Monica reacted in the situation with her son. I can already tell you the key principle, and these are the words of Jesus. He who abides in me, and I in him, abides in my love. If you like this episode, you are welcome to recommend us, leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, or follow us on Instagram. See you next time.